Hello. This is a film about a village called Bishop's Tachbrook. It's a little village with a long history. In this documentary, we will explore the ancient history of our village. We will see how it evolved and changed over hundreds of years with the invasion of the Normans, its role in myths and legends from the Middle Ages, how the church is evidence of times gone by, the memories of the recent past and present, and finally looking to the future for our village. The village and people of Bishop's Tachbrook invite you to come on a journey that spans millennia and take some leaps through our varied and rich history. Once upon a time there was a settlement not far from the centre of Tachbrook that could be a possible site for the origins of the village we live in. It's been under debate for many years, but many people believe that it is. The earliest maps made of the site show evidence of what could be ramparts dug for defence and can be seen in many examples of hill forts from the Iron Age period. A Dr. Hill from Warwick University in 2000 stated that it is definitely a small fort with evidence of roundhouses on the site. Although this is now known as Oakley Wood and there is abundant wildlife now, 2,500 years ago this may well have been a small settlement and Tachbrook's origin. To get a clearer picture of what it was like in those early times, I'm here with archaeologist David Sorapure. David, when was the Iron Age?
The Iron Age begins in Britain about 600 BC and it ends with the arrival of the Romans.
David, I know very little about the Iron Age. Could you please tell me about how the people lived?
Sure, they were a tribal people. They would have chieftains of their tribe. They would live together in settlements very much like this one, with a bank and a ditched enclosure. And in the closure would be their roundhouses.
Oh, so what were the roundhouses like?
Well, roundhouses were the little circular houses they would live in. They would have a thatched roof and wattle and daub walls. And wattle and daub, the daub was a mixture of mud and straw and cow dung. And they used to throw it and push it in against the wattle, which was timbers and material wound together. Inside you'd have a family group living together. They'd all live in there, sleep in there, eat in there, and anything else that they needed to do in there, such as repairing tools and making things.
David, you said that this ditch and the large bank were used partially for defence. How did they do that?
Well, you have to imagine that the ditch was probably much deeper back then, and the bank was probably a bit higher. It would have had a wooden palisade or a big fence in front of it, and from behind the palisade, they could defend against any attack with spears and arrows and stones and that sort of thing.
Were they a very warlike people?
The Romans certainly thought they were a warlike people. They were very fond of individual combat, and your warrior might have a spear and a shield, occasionally a helmet, and they were very fond of fighting, and they were particularly fond of cutting each other's heads off, or decapitation.
And this is what we want to test. So we have a group from Tachbrook School to see if the ramparts be any good as a defensive barrier for the settlers against vicious marauding bandits, hungry for food and any booty they can get their hands on. They're hell-bent on getting in. Obviously, we couldn't use real weapons, so the spears and axes have been replaced with water balloons. As you can see, villagers had the upper hand, and I think with our little experiment that we've added weight to the argument that this is indeed an Iron Age settlement. This means there could have been a settlement in Oakley Wood from 700 BC over 2,500 years ago. In those days, We're talking before the birth of Christianity and even before the Roman Empire. Small tribes existed as fairly loose regional collectives governed by local chieftains, and the history was not written down but was rather passed on in storytelling. So we don't know exactly how long people inhabited this site. 500, maybe 1,000 years. No one knows. But to continue on our journey, at some point in the distant past, this settlement was abandoned and the birth of a new community would begin.